Your shine is a bit too big. That's what a talented leader was told when she was advised to stop posting on LinkedIn her own wins. And here's what nobody tells you: every time it happens, you get a little quieter, a little safer, a little bit more agreeable, which is exactly what makes you invisible to the people deciding about your career. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to find out why companies reward compliance over contribution, why they don't actually want their best people to shine, and how to speak up, stand out, and still survive the politics. My guest spent more than 30 years inside the world's biggest tech and pharma companies, sitting in the HR rooms where these decisions actually get made. And what he saw in those rooms drove him to write a book so honest that his lawyer warned him that he could get fired. So he published it under a fake name. Powerhouses, this is the conversation your company hopes you never hear. Let's get into it with Tim Sharp. Tim, welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm very much interested in learning more about busting the business bullshit. Because we all know anybody who's been in corporate, anyone who's in corporate, they know there's a lot of BS and there's a lot of broken systems and cultures. And so we're going to get in the nitty gritty, I have a feeling. But as we start, you were a managing director by 29. And so that would tell someone that you were winning at the corporate game. So at what point did you realize that it was broken?
Yeah, no, look, thanks. I've been now working in corporates, rather depressingly, in one form or another for 32 years. So when I was a managing director, it was for a search firm where I was setting up in Singapore and Hong Kong. I was quite young then. But as I've worked in bigger and bigger organizations, the biggest in the world, tech companies, pharmaceutical companies, I think that's when it's really started to be clear to me just how bad working in corporates can be and how it fails a lot of employees. And there must be a better way of doing it. And so it's been in the past 10 years, particularly being in senior HR roles, that it's become extremely apparent to me that things aren't great.
Do you think you're seeing it because of your HR role, or are the things that are broken apparent to other functions and other leaders? They just may not be acknowledging it like an HR leader might need to.
Yeah, look, I think sometimes if you were to ask, some people would say HR is the worst of the lot, right? I think we're so focused sometimes on helping trying to fix the organization that we forget to kind of fix ourselves. I think a lot of people see it. I'm not sure. I talk in the book about there being a sort of pandemic, if you will, of truth telling. And I think a lot of people will turn a blind eye to it and ignore it because they're fulfilled in their jobs. But there's a lot like me that talk about it and see it.
And so where do you think the CEOs and the companies are really failing their people? Is there a particular area or a list of them?
Yeah, there's many. I think firstly, CEOs are so protected at the very top and they get managed messages. So if you can imagine, each layer manages a message as it goes up. It's like Chinese whispers. And so I think it's extremely difficult for them to have their finger on the pulse, as it were, of what's really going on, not the cultivated message, but what's really happening. And so, in some respects, I feel for them because they don't get the whole truth. So, when thousands of projects and programs and millions that they pay to partners, consultancies, it doesn't work. Well, the reason why it doesn't work is people are afraid to tell the truth. And so this is how a lot of these programs fail. But anyway, I think a lot of them are susceptible to that. And then the really clever CEOs come down into the business all the time. They try to get onto the shop floor. They try to really understand what's happening, but it's extremely difficult for them. I mean, Elon Musk is a good example. Not that I love everything that he does, but he slept on the factory floor of Tesla for 7 or 8 months on the production line. That is what CEOs, in my mind, should do everywhere. because otherwise there's this massive beast that they're managing. And how do they really get across everything that they need to get across to? I think that's one really, really big area that needs fixing. But I think it's just all the bullshit that goes on around the politics. It's almost like no one's actually really bothered about fixing the things that need fixing. What you really need to do is play the political game. And if you play that game, you're more likely to succeed. Meanwhile, in my previous companies, they wonder why no new products and services are created. Well, the reason why no new products and services are created is because they've put the wrong people in the wrong jobs because of politics and because of this sort of, I'm going to hire people in the same vision as myself. I'm going to hire people that fit in, not the people that are going to say, hey, this is wrong, that's wrong. What about that? Why have you missed that? They don't want those types of talent. They want the talent that will do as they're told and has earned their stripes in the form that they want you in. So that's
Right.
another reason why all these companies don't have the products and services, because there's this that gets in the way. They haven't hired the right people. So there's so many things that happen in corporates that create the corporates that we have for today. And at the end of the day, it's not good enough.
And in your book, Busting Business Bullshit, and I want you to kind of share some background on that. But at the same time, the subtitle of that book is From Corporate Nonsense to the Rise of the 20% Company. Help us understand what that means.
Yeah, so the nonsense part is the politics, all the stuff that gets in the way of you actually doing your job that you're paid to do. And I think the right people get extremely frustrated by it. The wrong people love it. That's what they kind of live for in the corporates. And then the rise of the 20% company, it's a bit provocative. It kind of comes at two elements. One, I think the technical revolution, the AI revolution, and the fact that I think you can do a lot more with less. But I am also making a rather provocative statement that there are so many folks in corporate that they just kind of turn up, clock in, and go home. It's almost like they're worker zombies, and they're not really adding much value. Now, a lot of the time, it's because of the corporate environment culture. They don't make it interesting for
Right.
people either. So it's a two-way sword there. But that's really what it's talking about, that I think corporates could do pretty much the same with chopping a lot of that sort of corporate zombie type of employee, to be honest, as well.
And what are the excuses of why that is happening? Because people will immediately say, well, it's AI or it's generational. What have you observed as to how that rise of the 20% has been occurring over probably decades, right?
I mean, this has been going on an awful long time, but I think it's as bad as it's ever been. I mean, if you look at well-being, for example, and I absolutely love this, in a employee survey in a previous company I worked for, someone was saying basically that well-being's like a concrete parachute. And what they were really meaning by that is, best well-being you can do for me is stop firing people so I'm doing three people's job. And
Mm,
so I can't go home and see my family. That's where my well-being is, when I'm going home, spending time with my family and friends, right? But actually I'm working longer and longer hours. So instead of sort of recommending little meditation breaks, why don't you let me go home at a reasonable hour and let me recharge that way? So I think it's the same, right? Similarly, in big corporates, that they're constantly what they call cost optimizing, shrinking, 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 but then asking everyone to do an awful lot more. And so this is where I think a lot of health issues, mental health issues are happening. And actually, in the US, it was quite amazing. I was managing teams globally, and the teams in the US couldn't believe the amount of holiday that we have in Europe, the amount of maternity and paternity cover. Women in the US, they give birth and they're expected back after a couple of weeks. Actually, if you take a step back and look at it, it's inhumane. It's actually inhumane. You've got a new baby that you're besotted by, and you've just got to kind of leave them at home and go back to work. I mean, it's actually archaic. And I
right.
think there's so much of this stuff that's happening in corporates. And if you actually reflect on it, and I've been there myself, you've got a family to feed, you've got mortgages, school, whatever it might be, elderly parents. The system can kind of trap you a bit. And so you're a bit fearful, I better not talk out of turn too much. because I might get the bullet. And if I get the bullet, how am I going to fund my family? And so I think these things are in the back of everyone's head. And of course, big corporates, just like politicians, they understand that leverage very, very well. They know that they ultimately have the upper hand. And so I think it's really important that employees start to really wake up and take a look at all of this stuff, because I think we've had the shitty end of the stick for an awful long time.
Well, you being an HR leader, I'm going to come after you for a little bit, but you being an HR leader, you guys have also perpetuated it because of the fact that people need their jobs and therefore support some of the changes that are working against them, but yet fill in the blank. Where do you see HR's role in really pushing back, and or what is the struggle that even HR leaders are having to course correct the shift that the corporate leaders are making?
Yeah, no, look, it's a great question and a great call out. I think the biggest sort of misunderstanding of human resources in general is that they're there to represent the employee base. They're not. They're there to represent the corporate position. And the corporate position might not be the employee position. You're paid by the corporate, you're there to protect the corporate interests. Now, there are a lot of extremely passionate HR folks that do absolutely care about the employees.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the system, the structure is positioned in a way where your priorities are not necessarily the employee the whole time. So I think that that's something to be understood about, because I think HR can sometimes get a bad brand in some of this, and it's because of that. However, as I sort of said to you before we kicked off, sometimes I think the politics can be the worst in HR. And I think it's perhaps that we spend so much time servicing and partnering with the business to ensure that the business is thriving that we can sometimes forget to drink our own medicine, so to speak. And we forget about ourselves is a common thing that I think happens a lot in the global HR departments everywhere.
And when you say that, you mean that you forget about the fact that sometimes your own systems are broken and needs improvement, and therefore taking the time to do the work internally, not just always leveraging or even using the business as a reason for not doing the internal work.
Yeah, because you get a lot of senior HR business partners, and they're there to strategically support the business. So they'll use all of their time, energy, intellect in ensuring that the business is positioned in the right way and thriving. What we don't do is turn that gaze back on ourselves and do the same work on ourselves, which
Right.
is why a lot of the time you'll hear that the business is frustrated by HR because we don't keep up with the same pace that the business does. And these are things that I think HR could improve upon. But let's be honest, it's within the corporate construct, and the
Mhm.
corporate construct is set up for predominantly profit and shareholder. That is the number one. Now, the smart ones will ensure that they hire the very best people and let them get on with things, pay them extraordinarily well, and make the environment a place where you can thrive. The ones that are not smart are the ones that do the complete opposite, which is why so many corporates are not doing as well as they could nowadays.
Have you observed certain companies that fall into the former that you just mentioned, that they're doing a good job, that they put their people first, that they build the culture to really ensure that everyone is benefiting from the business, not from a profit perspective? But have you found companies that are doing a good job at what they should be, at stewarding to their base, so to speak?
I can't think of many. Like, for example, you have the myth of a Netflix. But actually, when you scratch the surface, it sounded like a bloody awful culture, quite honestly. So I think that there's a lot of these organizations that get the shine off of doing that, that actually have got quite toxic work environments. There's not many. There's probably quite small SMEs out there. Like, I remember reading about Innocent, the fruit juice company that does the really healthy They do it as close as they possibly can to sort of real life fruit. That company sounded like it was extremely considerate of its employees, the benefits, the work-life balance, the scope, the freedom, the responsibility, the flexibility. So I think if you're brave enough to really do these things, really, really do them and live and breathe by them and trying to eradicate the politics, eradicate this notion that you have to be compliant to be thought of as to get into the most senior ranks. So you've done all the right things, when what they should be looking at is the person that's not saying much but has a lot to say, the people that lead from the front and say, hey, our culture's broken, here's the examples, and for leaders to really pay attention to that. These types of things should be a lot more prevalent than they are. I talk about soft corruption, and it sounds like quite a harsh term, but when you get to the very senior ranks of an organization, they have normally had to cultivate themselves in a certain way. And they really, everything about them is to support the system that they're in, rather than try and change the system to be better. And those folks are the ones that get promoted. And then they promote similar people to that. And then you look around the boardroom and everyone's looking and sounding the same, right? There's no diversity of thought. There's no one covering your blind spots. And then they wonder why the business is tanking. And that is, for me, that is soft corruption. And I'm in HR where I specialize in talent and learning. And I see it all the time that the very best people that should be moving up through in organizations are the ones that absolutely don't move through. And the ones that absolutely shouldn't, a lot of the time, do move through.
What is causing companies to struggle so much in supporting those top performers versus giving those promotions to the average Joe?
Well, look, I think the first thing, I don't think corporates really want high performers. So I've specialized in this space for 33 years. I'm not sure they want them, because high performers are painful. They're going to question you. They're going to demand things. They're going to create things. They're going to want to move you faster. They're going to want to open the box that you're trying to close the whole time. So actually, I'm not sure how much corporates really want the true high performers, the ones that really think out the box, that are going to shake things up. Because when you think outside the box and you shake things up, it has reverberations. Those reverberations, a lot of the time, they can't be bothered to manage. It's too much like hard work. They like the status quo. So that's why I think, and like I said, they would far prefer to hire someone in their ilk and vision. And this isn't an old tried and trusted. They talk about the halos and the horns when you interview people, that you're more likely to like the people that look and sound like you.
Right.
What, that hasn't really gone away. It really hasn't. With all the mechanisms to try and weed out, biases happen all the time. It takes an extraordinarily brave and courageous leader and leadership group to smack against this trend. Now, bearing in mind as well that those leaders have benefited from the bollocks that I'm talking about.
Right.
So they're less likely to unravel it. The
Right.
better people that would unravel it and continue to unravel it are the ones that don't get the opportunity to unravel it. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then it amazes me that they wonder why in 10 years that there's been no new medicines that pipelines created, or there's been no new technology that everyone's using. Well, how's this happened? And then what do? They'll go and buy the company that has created it, and then they will bring it into their company, and then give it a few years, then they're pronouncing that it was always part of their company. And
Right.
so this cycle goes on, right?
It's almost like the entertainment industry. They don't have a new creative idea, so they just take the same old and
Yes,
repackage
yes,
it.
yes.
It's just so exasperating when you see that. It's kind of like, do you not have a new idea? The other thing that came up for me from what you said is, if you really peel back all the layers of that generalized view you just stated, it also screams that there's so many insecure leaders and they don't want those high potentials. The reason why they don't want to support the high performers, because the fact that they push back, is it also creates a lot of intimidation for them. It brings up a lot of fear that these people could be replacing them. And therefore, the answer to them is, let's just hold them down. Let's just keep them where they are. Let's just not have to deal with it. Do you also see that as well?
Yeah, they're both brilliant points. So, taking the second point first, I have seen that so many times in my job. It is true, it's alive. It's what Robert Greene talks about. Don't outshine the master, the boss. It is so true. You have to be very, very, very careful how you play this. And the really clever ones, they'll give a bit, they'll pull back. But if you overgive and you overshare and you're too good, you are a threat. And absolutely, managers look at that and have always done and will always do. And again, if you have a really healthy, thriving HR area and department, that should be what they're trying to do. But then, of course, they're also in the system doing exactly the same thing. So that
Right.
is a really great. And then the first point you made, I think, is I've we've spoken about this so often. Creativity and innovation is actually rather difficult. And the reason why the movie industry, they'll just do small little iterations and bring out another Jurassic Park is because they know that that's the easiest way to bring in some profit. We'll add a few dinosaurs here or there. The branding's strong. We'll get a number of punters off of the branding, sell it that way. It's a model that they know that works. Yeah,
It's safe.
yeah, but what amazes me is when you're truly innovative and you bring out a really innovative film that didn't cost that much money and has made hundreds or billions, and then it sweeps across the world and everyone is just infatuated by it. You would think that they would try and get to that more because of the impact that it has, but they don't. They regurgitate the same stuff. It's because behind the scenes, what I'm talking about will probably be even worse in the entertainment
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah. It's exasperating. And being in that
Yes.
space for a good while, it's exasperating. Now, one
Yeah.
theme you have brought up multiple times, I want you to speak to if you could, and that is you have made the statement that it takes courage. And I think in a lot of conversations like this, that can tend to kind of slip by, but not where I'm concerned because I love words. So help us understand what it takes to be a courageous leader and how the lack of that is also contributing to what everything that we're talking about, especially you're busting the business bullshit.
So I had a problem with drinking. I realized that when I turned 40. I'm 52 now, so I've been sober for 12 years. And I had to have a long, hard look at myself and the way that I was living my life and be honest about the problem that I had. And then, of course, when you do the 12 steps, the searing honesty that you need to have with yourself and the courage that you need to have to look at yourself honestly is shocking. But also, what it gives you is it makes you look at your values again and you build yourself up from the ashes, so to speak. And you really have to look at who you are, what you stand for, and what you continue to want to be, and really be focused on your values. And one of mine is courage. And so many people are not courageous because
Mhm.
they are so fearful of the things that we said, losing their job, being ostracized, being outed in public. All of these things are things that where people shy away, but I firmly believe in my heart that is one of the best ways everyone can get the right well-being and policy in the US for more maternity and paternity, to say no, This is absolute bullshit. It's
Mhm.
absolutely archaic. And you should have better policies and talk about it, call things out. And there is always another job to get. Life can be quite rewarding, but there can be ramifications as well. And it's being okay with those ramifications. How do you want to live your life? One of the best definitions, hell is looking at what you could have become but didn't. So
Mm,
just on your deathbed, you see all the things you could have become, but you didn't. I really find that very, very, very powerful.
yeah,
And you're not going to be the best version of yourself sitting in whatever company you are, being treated badly or afraid to say something when you're an expert in what you say for the ramifications. These are the things that ultimately I think will you think about when you leave the office. They're things
sure.
that eat you up. And do you want that to happen, or do you want to have a free mind, so to speak, and operate with courage? Because I do. I think just like truth telling is nowhere to be seen, I think so many people are living in such fear, and I think some of it did happen from the sort of wokeism, DEI type of agenda that was happening. I think it did get pretty crazy. And I think people were just afraid to say anything anywhere. And I think that's kind of still reverberating through. And I think it really needs to stop, because the only people that are losing out are the employees and the general public.
Absolutely agree. Now, I want to touch on, well, I mentioned your book a couple times, Busting Business
Mm,
Bullshit, and you wrote it under a pseudonym of
yeah.
Philip Armstrong Feng. So give
Yes.
us some background as to why that is, but more so, what is the book and how can our listeners and viewers really leverage that if they
Yeah.
were wanting to create change in their
Yeah.
business?
Yeah, look, I've just as you're talking, I was thinking, it's not hypocrisy for me to write it under a pseudonym. We're talking about courage, and but genuinely, had I had written the book under my name in my previous company, it would have caused a lot of issues, and I probably would have got fired. I saw a lawyer. They looked through my contract and said you would be in breach of your code of conduct. Not that I'm saying anything about the company that I was working for. I'm talking more plurally, but this can be the environment. And we have mortgages, and we were building a house, and it was just too risky. So it goes to show you is exactly why I did it under a pseudonym, was because of the fear of talking honestly like this. This is why so many people end up talking when they have left their career or industry, because then they feel like they're free. I'm
Right,
doing it whilst I'm still working, and it really is tricky. But that's why I did it under a pseudonym, was to protect myself. But
right.
now I've moved on to a different company, and I just don't care as much as I used to.
And why did you feel that you needed to write this book?
I just it got to the point where I just couldn't believe what I was seeing and witnessing on so many levels so consistently. I just one day I just started writing it thinking, this could be my small help to everyone to sort of wake up and rise up a little bit to what's happening, and create a better working environment for everyone. And so it was rather cathartic writing it, and I just didn't stop. And I've done it in sort of points. So there's 1 to 25 points. You can pick it up. It does loosely follow a theme, but you can pick up point 13 or point 25. They're quite separate. And yeah, I go after all the things that I've seen and experienced.
Well, speaking of the points, 10 points to get promoted fast. What would you say is the most cynical one?
The most cynical one is having the honey potion in your ears screaming the Republic. So if you're going to agree with your boss, if you're just going to push your manager's agenda, regardless of whether you think it's right or wrong, if you're astute at knowing when to say and when not to say the thing, you're far more likely to be promoted, right? So if you're a good little soldier, you comply, you do all the right things, you say all the right things, you keep your nose squeaky clean. You still show up, and you still put some effort in, of course, and you still have to have some results. But if you do that, put it this way, no names, but I spoke to someone not so long ago. They were told not to promote themselves so much on LinkedIn because their shine was just maybe a bit too big. So again, Robert Greene with his points as well, a fan of his laws, they're very, very prevalent. So you need to be astute to these things in the organization. And if you're good at that, you're going to rise up through the ranks very, very quickly. If you're someone that calls things out and says, hey, we've got a better way, you don't really look at the sacred cows with any respect. You look at how to fix the thing that you're trying to fix as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Those types of individuals normally shake the tree too much and they're less likely to be promoted.
Oh, Boise, Boise. So, what would you leave our viewers with around what they could be doing today to change what it is that we were talking about, to get more courageous and to kind of shake that tree?
Yeah, look, I think we've got social media now is absolutely amazing. Look at what you're doing and others, giving people like myself a voice. These things are important. I think you can write on Substack, you can do a book yourself, you can kind of get out there, get your message out there. And I think if you want to have more self esteem, then you do esteemable things. If you want to have more courage, then you have to practice speaking up, telling it how it is, living by your values, and then not being overly concerned. As long as you're respectful, you're professional, you're empathetic. I'm not sort of saying you go and say something vicious to someone's face, even if that's not going to get anyone anywhere, and that's not the way you want to conduct yourself. But if you're practicing when something doesn't feel right and you know that it doesn't sit well, and you know that what you've just heard isn't quite correct, or you've seen something that's not right and you could build a different way, the only way that you can do it is lean into that and have the courage to keep practicing it. And what I found is the right people and the right company will find you
Mm-hmm.
and they will see that. Now, it's not that many, but you have to have a bit of faith in that path that you're walking down, because there are many, many amazing, amazing people out there calling all of this stuff out. I mean, I was
Right.
a bit of ahead of the game. Now, the amount of podcasts and the amount of people talking about this stuff is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that the more we do that, the more pressure it puts for companies to, because here's the thing, actually experts and professionals that are really good at their job, there's not as many as you think, actually. And so companies, they do want the best people if they can get their hands on it. So there is power in that. But I think employees need to recognize this and wake up to it a bit and lean into it a bit more and not play that game so much, because at the end of the day, where's it got everyone? 2 weeks off with your baby.
Right.
So is that really the outcome of that? Where this is all? Yeah. So this is what's on the line, to be honest.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Well, I want to remind everyone, please look up his book, Busting Business Bullshit. It will be under the name of Philip Armstrong Fang. So don't be surprised around that, but it's Tim. It's
It's
Tim.
me.
It's him. At the same time, you can find him on LinkedIn as T Sharp One. And you can also find him on Facebook and Instagram as Tim Sharp. Tim,
Perfect.
thank you
Thank you.
so much. This has been fabulous.
Likewise. Thank you very much. Really, really lovely conversation. Thanks for all the great questions.
You are very, very welcome. Powerhouses, if you take one thing from today's discussion with Tim, take this. Courage is not a personality trait, it's a practice. You don't wait to feel brave. You speak up once respectfully and on record, and then you do it again and again and again. That's how you stop being the best kept secret in your company. So grab Tim's book, Busting Business Bullshit, on Amazon, and or you can go right to bustingbusinessbullshit.com. Remember, you're going to find it under his pen name, Philip Armstrong Fang. Now you know the story behind the name, and honestly, it makes the book hit even harder. Now, if you scored yourself high on talent and low on visibility in your own head while listening to my discussion with Tim, don't just nod along. Find out exactly what's standing between you and your next role. Take my free leadership gap diagnostic. It takes about 10 minutes. You can scan the QR code or find the link in the description and pinned comment. You can also go to balloffirecoaching.com/opt-in. If this conversation named something that you've been feeling, subscribe and hit the bell, because every week we work to shed another layer of the beliefs, behaviors, and BS holding you back. That's going to get you the promotion, the employee engagement, and the success that you want. I'll see you there. Bye.